Well, howdy there, Internet students. This is Mr. Hermanson. This is lesson 7.28, part 3. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to solve inequalities that involve multiplication and division. And basically, it's the same as solving equations. It's just that there's a certain situation that causes a bit of a problem that you have to remember. And I'm going to try and illustrate that right now by just going through these operations here and finding out what happens. So if we add 2 to each of these, A ends up being 1, B ends up being 4, and we can see that the inequality symbol would still be the same. 1 is less than 4. Subtracting 3 from each side, that would give us -2 on A's position and 1 on B's position, and we can see that A is still less than B. Adding -2 would give us -4 for A and -1 for B, and -4 is less than -1. Subtracting -4, subtracting a negative is the same as adding 4. A would be at 0, B would be at 3, and we still are less than here. 0 is less than 3. Multiplying by 2 wouldn't change A's position. 0 times 2 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 0 is less than 6. Subtracting 7, A would be at -7. B would be at -1. -7 is less than -1. Multiplying both sides by -3. -7 times -3 is positive 21. -1 times -3 is positive 3. Notice what happened right there. We just had to change the sign around because we multiplied by a negative number. So let's see if that ever happens any other case. So basically, I think what that means is that when we multiply by a negative, we need to remember to switch the sign because the direction of the inequality is changing. Adding 5 gives us 26 and 8. 26 is greater than 8. Sign stays the same. Dividing by -4. 26 divided by -4 is -6.5. 8 divided by -4 is -2. Notice that -6.5 is now less than -2. So the sign switched again when we divided by a negative. So there's something going on here with these negatives. Subtracting 2 gives us -8.5 and -4. And -8.5 is less than -4. Multiplying by -1 gives us positive 8.5 and positive 4. And notice 8.5 is now greater than 4. So I'm going to circle these in red, the places where the sign changed. When we multiplied by -3, when we divided by -4, and when we multiplied by -1. What that means is that when you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to reverse the sign. All right, so what I'm telling you here is that as long as you are just, as long as you're solving inequalities, you really can do everything that you do when you're solving equations. It's just that sometimes you have to reverse the sign, and that happens when you're multiplying or dividing by negative. So in this first problem, the way you would solve x divided by 2, you guys know that you would multiply both sides by 2. That gets rid of this dividing by 2 and gives us 1x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1x is less than -3 times 2 is -6. So we're going to put an open circle on -6 and draw our arrow this way to solve this. So the reason I didn't have to reverse the sign there is because I was multiplying by a positive number. All right. So go ahead, you can work your way through these problems and you can check back and see if you got them right. So your answer should look like that if you did it correctly. All right. Now multiplying by a negative number. So in this problem, we're multiplying, we have a negative on this side of the equation. In order to solve this, we're going to want to multiply both sides by -3. That way we get a positive n. And when we're multiplying by negative, you have to reverse the sign. So now we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to take our original equation. Negative n divided by 3 is less than -1. We're going to multiply both sides by -3. And when I do that, I get positive n on this side. I reverse the sign because I multiplied by a negative, and equals +3. So we're going to put an open circle at 3 and make the arrow go that way. All right. Now when you're doing a fraction, we have a negative fraction. The best way to get rid of that fraction is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, -3/2. And so when I do that, when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, you get 1w. But we multiply by a negative, so I'm going to switch the sign. And then I'm going to multiply -3/2 times 2. -3/2 is really -1.5 times 2 is -3. And so I'm going to put a closed circle at -3 and then put my arrow this way. Now, remember that you can check your answers by checking the boundary point first. So if I put -3 in where w is and multiply it by -2/3, I should equal 2 if I did this right. And -2/3 times -3 is equal to 2, so that checks out. And then you check one number that's somewhere in your solution. And since in my equation I'm dividing by 3, I'm going to pick a number that's divisible by 3. I'm going to pick -6. So if I do -2/3 times -6, -6 is down here. That equals +4, and 4 is greater than or equal to 2. So that works also. So I check two things. All right. So on this problem, we're going to create an equation to represent the problem. Then we're going to solve the equation. It says the cheerleader squad earns $5.50 per car washed. Well, that's just 550 times however many cars. Let's use a C for cars. And then it says, how many does a squad need to wash to earn at least $77? At least means greater than or equal to $77. Now to solve this, it's a division problem. So we're going to divide both sides by 550. And that gives me 14. So they need to sell at least 14 cars. Now notice I didn't switch the sign because I was dividing by a positive number. So we need to sell at least 14 cars, or wash at least 14 cars. All right. See if you can write an equation for this one, and then you can check back and see if you got that answer right. All right, here's your answer for that. We're going to do one more problem here. We're going to find the solutions to this. To solve this equation, we're going to divide both sides by -5. And when we do that, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. When you divide by a negative, you have to reverse the sign. And so we get A is greater than or equal to -4. So less than or equal to -4. So I'm going to have -4 somewhere on my number line, and then I'm going to want the numbers to the left of that. Go ahead, you try this last one here, and you can check back and see if you got the right answer. Your answer should look something like that. Looks like we're done with the lesson here, so you can go ahead and practice some problems. Good luck.